Hey, I'm Tempesta. This is Sailing Anarchy. Well, not really. It's got to be my 12-year-old son's room because it doesn't look very together, but it's actually my office. And today I'm joined, luckily enough, by an old friend. I mean that in the best of ways. Alex Camet. I hate to call you a local San Diego sailor, but really, you've done most of your sailing within the confines of San Diego. Yes, I know your CV shows regattas everywhere, but really, wouldn't you say it's safe to say you've done the bulk of your sailing in this town?
Majority, yeah.
Yeah,
And I didn't say, well, California for the most part. Lots of San Francisco sailing, lots of Long Beach sailing,
yeah.
lots of San Diego, lots of Mexico, West Coast sailing for the most part, and by choice. I think that for me, growing up and having an opportunity and having family here in San Diego and then wanting to have a family and having kids and being a parent is really what's kept me in San Diego. And there's great opportunities and it's good fun. Now we're sailing with our kids, which is fantastic. And, we're going to pull the Etchels out, with all the kids now. We used to
Oh,
do
yeah.
it, my father, brother, and I, and it was great. And we used to sail lasers, my sister, brother, and I, and, and those were those days. And now we're moving on, but our kids want to get involved and they want to sail, and
It's great. I
place to
mean,
go sailing.
it's full circle. So some of you folks out there don't know who Alex is. I'll start off with the funniest story at the top of his CV is 1986. He was the foredeck on a Freres 40 called Tango Express, and we finished second because that's when Alex and I actually sailed together on your dad's Freres 40.
Right.
I was working for Sobstad. I was amazed to get the order. Thought I had no shot. Figured North had it locked up, but maybe your dad fell and hit his head. Maybe a little too much resin as he was building the boat. I don't know. But he came to us, and it was such a great time. I mean, how old were you in '86?
I was 16 years old.
16. Yeah, well, must have been like 30. How old are you now, Alan?
49.
49. Let's see, do the math. Yeah, 14. Yeah, okay. Right in that ballpark. But going down your list, 1989 youth champion in the laser, 1990 youth worlds as a coach, 3 golds and a silver, Melga's national championships in 1993 first, you were the national champion in laser class in 1997, Etchels worlds, there's yachting cup, more Etchels, and then what's interesting about your career, Alex, is how you've gone, I wouldn't call it exclusively, but how you've turned more big boat sailor than small boat sailor. Now, I think part of that comes with maybe the age, I mean, maybe, or is it just a case of opportunity?
The answer is both. That's a simple and quick answer. But the longer answer is, laser became Olympic in 1996 in Savannah, in Atlanta. And our trials were in Savannah. We grew up sailing lasers. Well, we grew up sailing anything that was on water. It was a Sabot, it was a laser, it was an Alpha, it was called an Alpha 1, and you had to qualify in that boat to be able to go and sail the Laser 2 that the yacht club owned. Okay, so you had to qualify to be able to even sail a Laser 2. Then we sailed Snipes, and we sailed Etchels, and we sailed Lightnings, and we sailed any boat that we could get our hands on. And I think that one of those benefits of those boats at that time was that we learned how to tune boats, and we learned how to make boats go fast no matter what boat we were sailing. So that's something we should talk about later in regards to the difference between then and now and how sailing has evolved or potentially not evolved.
Sure. And you started super young. What, 6? You started at 6?
I was 6 years old.
Right.
And my dad got me a Sabot, pushed me off the dock. I think I went out, the boom broke. And the next day I had a brand new, wooden boom that he made for me. And here's a real quick story you'd appreciate. So this is 1979. Mark Reynolds is one of the coaches at the yacht club. Deanne Wright, this is pre their marriage, is the junior director. So I got a newer little Sabot, and we sailed to Kellogg's Beach, a mile away. Everybody beach your Sabots, bring them on up on the beach. Well, I guess I should have known. That was a sign back then. I didn't beach my Sabot.
Right.
And I sailed back and forth along the beach. Got back to the yacht club when this was all said and done, you know, got called into the office, and Dan says, I think you're out. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm 9 years old. Now you're suspended from the sailing program at 9 for not doing what you were told. So I guess I should have started racing then, right? You know, I didn't want to damage the boat. I didn't want to scratch it. It's like sandpaper, right? I mean, sandpaper, literally. So funny story, but we'll move on. And so comes, you know, laser becomes Olympic, and we've got 200 boats sailing every regatta. You've got to qualify to get to the trials. We sail, you know, we leave San Diego, we go to Lake Tahoe to race a race. We go to Colorado, to Cherry Creek in Aurora, Colorado, because the Olympic Festival Regatta is happening there. And there are 200 lasers on a little creek, you know, so we got a lot of guys sailing, and a lot of these guys are still sailing. And it's interesting, a lot of these guys are now all professional too. So it's interesting how kind of we progressed, and we were doing this was all fun. This wasn't, we need to train 7 days a week, we need to go to the gym, we need to eat, you know, power bars, we need to live and die by our training.
Sure.
So this is pre-Olympic campaigns. This is pre-$1 million campaign. This is jump in your van, hope you make it, and fix it along the way. So, you know, that brought a lot of good times. And for us, we loved it. We sailed in 40 different states and 6 different countries, you know, and it was just to have fun. And it happens to be that we were sailing, and we sailed more, and you became better. You got your 10,000 hours, and all of a sudden you're at the top and making a little bit of noise in the top. So that's kind of how we got started. And then we're like, wow, the laser's Olympic, let's go for it. Why don't we all go for it? And when I'm saying we all, I'm talking about my brother and sister and myself. And, you know, we went for it, didn't do well, but at the same time, you know, the year before the Olympic trials, I was running John Collius's sailing school in Punta Gorda, Florida. And the 49er had just come out. We got like the first 6 ones. So Cam Lewis comes down and goes, let's go. And we go out and it's blowing, and we capsize, and we try to crawl up on the dagger board, scratch the dagger board with the hook from the trapeze harness, you know, finally get back up and going. And it was great. You know, we had the best time. And I'm like, wow, this is a little different than laser sailing. And happened to meet, you know, a lot of guys sailing Melges 24s at that time. And, you know, the trials didn't go well for me, but that's the time where, you know, 1995 at the trials, you know, 96 of the Olympics, and you got to make a choice. And what choice are you going to make? Are you going to become an Olympic campaigner for life? Or are you going to go after going for the worlds? Or are you going to do something else with your sailing? And that's really, that to me was that point where you know, left turn and changed my sailing up and went towards Melges 24s. They were hot, you know.
Alec, why not the 49er? Why didn't you go that way?
So the 49er, that's a great question. The 49er was brand new, you know, it was brand new to it. We had 6 of them there with Collius. We sailed them, and I think I already knew, as Ed Adams always told me, he's like, Alex, you're the fastest lazy hiking guy I know in the laser. I'm like, well, what does that mean? He's like, well, everyone's at the gym and here you are talking to me. And I'm like, what? I don't see the problem. You know, so I think for me, it was just a change in one, wanting to sail with more people, meaning a bigger crew.
Sure.
And 2, you know, maybe the physical side of it a little bit too, because it wasn't, you know, I was never that driven to go and sit at the gym and lift weights and, you know, try to out hike somebody. You know, I'd rather be in a tactical situation and do the tactics, you know, think 5 steps ahead. So
let me ask you a question. You mentioned earlier, you know, we did the 10,000 hours of sailing, and you just get better. Is that true though? I mean, I think there could be a lot of people that could sail an equal amount of hours, and I'm sure a lot of people have sailed equal amounts of hours and never attained sort of the level that guys like you did. What do you think it was? I mean, was it your focus? I mean, I know you're a smart guy to start with. Was it your ability to grasp things, the nuances of the sport better? What were some of the elements that just made you progress to the top, sort of really wherever you've been sailing. You're at the pointy end of the fleet, almost always. What are those elements?
Well, one, we weren't out there by ourselves. You know, we had plenty of people. Anybody who had a laser could come out and go sailing against you, and all of a sudden you're two-boat testing, and there's
Yeah.
3, and there's 5, and you're doing rapid starts, and you're racing, you know, 4-mile upwind legs, and you don't realize, you know, how much you're sailing, but we're sailing 5 days a week. I'd come home from school, we'd go sailing.
Yeah.
And that was a lot more fun than doing homework, you know. So we went sailing, and we went sailing with our buddies, and we'd go sailing all day long, all afternoon, and you know, back then there was a gentleman's club that had a boat that would go out, and the ladies would go out. So we would get out, you know, we wouldn't know what time they'd go out, but we'd get on their wake and we'd surf their wake all the way out to the end of the point and just, you know, enjoy the sights, as you could say. And did it make us better? Well, yeah, sure. We had to stay on that wave and surf all the way out with them if we want to see anything, right? So, you know, those are some of the fun things. But you know, I trained a lot with, you know, like George Szabo. You know, these are all guys that you know, and George is great. You know, he had a laser, and it was brown, and we had a water spout that flew his laser into a tree and broke it. So I sold him my laser, so I knew that boat was fast, and I got a new laser, and we went out and we trained. And George is great. Every time George would change something and try to go faster, and he would go faster. The great thing was that George could never remember what he changed. He changed so much stuff, but I could. And I was like, geez, okay, if I put my out haul at this thing, you know, this is going to work. So we did push each other, and you know, long answer, but the short answer is, oh yeah, absolutely. You could go out and go cruising for 10,000 hours and not learn very much.
So is it safe to say, I mean, you mentioned some of the sort of the older school names, right? You mentioned Ed Adams, I think, and you've been around a lot. You know, we don't need to mention Dennis, but you've obviously spent X amount of time with Dennis Conner, and we can get into that if we have time. But do you think that the people that you are around, and we're talking high quality sailors, how much did you learn from these guys? Was there much of an influence? Were you intimidated by them? But once you started to get to a point in your ability where you could, you know, sit at the same table with them, as it were, how important were those guys in your development?
Sure. So first of all, you're right. You need to get somewhere to be somebody, because no one's going to give you that chance, right? So, you know, as I was growing up, I knew Jack Sutphin, who was the B-boat driver for Dennis Conner in the 12 meters. And in 6th grade, I did a biography on Dennis Conner, you know, and I sat with Jack, and we got all these pictures, and I did it, and it was great, you know. So I knew who he was, and I read his book. And, you know, in Dennis's book, he talks about, hey, I showed up at the yacht club, and I walked down the dock, and I said, can I get a ride? And I did the same thing, you know. But luckily, by then, some people kind of knew my name just a little bit, like, oh, here's that junior sailor. It'd be nice to have a junior sailor come on board, because I don't want to do all the work, you know. So, and then I will say there were a lot more opportunities back then than there are now. Now it's really, really hard to get sailing, because there aren't that many big boat programs. They're just, you know, sailing is not as big anymore in that regards to what it was back in the 80s and the early 90s. So it was a good chance for me to jump on and go sailing with Dennis Conner, Vince Brune, Mark Reynolds, Dave Ullman, you know, all those guys. And remember, back then, the pros were the sailmakers.
Absolutely.
You know, so if you wanted to do any kind of sailing, you wanted to go work at a loft, and that's what I always wanted to do. And, you know, and oh my gosh, right? Then, you know, way back in the day, I was cutting sail numbers for you guys at Sobstad for 15 cents for a 1, and any other number was 25. You know, and it was Mark, and you were there too, you know, and
yep.
And those are the times where those numbers were like Roman numerals, you know.
They were the greatest. The Sobstad sail numbers were the best.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. So great, you know, pain in the butt to cut and cut straight. I remember you a couple of times, you're like, oh, well, this one's not good. I'm not paying you. Dude, I'm 15 years old, you know, and Szabo was there too. So, you know, those were good times, and sailing, that was the place to be, you know. And then, you know, I tried to go work in North, and Vince very smartly said, no, you know, so I'm like, oh, I guess I got to get better. So I went and sailed some more. We sailed snipes. We did really great, you know, so, you know, sailed the snipe junior worlds and spent a lot of time in the snipe learning how to tune. I remember crewing for Mark Reynolds in the snipe as well. And, you know, the long answers, but it's putting the time in. If you want to do well, you got to put the time in. You got to put your 10,000 hours in. You got to put more hours than that in now. You've got to have a decent program. You got to train against somebody that knows what they're doing. You know, you've got to have it now. It's down. It's very scientific now. You know, you're writing all these notes. You're doing all these videos. You're paying all this attention to every little detail, and you're just grinding away at it. And great if you want to do that. And there's room for that. And sometimes maybe there's too much of a push for that, because if there's anything that this pandemic is going to teach us is that let's go sailing with our family and friends, and wow, am I going to be thankful the day that I get to go sailing, and I'm going to appreciate going out on the water because I couldn't go out on the water. And I think, you know, you mentioned sailing in the Harbor 20 with your girlfriend. I'd love to take out the Harbor 20.
It's so fun.
And that's what it's really about. You know, they're talking about getting the beer can races again going. Well, why don't we make it family racing? Make it main and jib, no spinnakers. Get somebody out there. You know what? Why not? And it's a great opportunity. And families are coming back together. Families used to sail together. We might have been pushing too much of an Olympic focus, and that's fine. But those guys are going to come, right? Like those guys that 1% are going to come through anyways. But let's teach people about other sailing.
Well, you know, it's such a good point, because one thing that I found that happened racing all the time. Granted, I'm just sailing PHRF in San Diego, but you know, still racing is racing. And not everybody is, you know, Olympic quality. In fact, I'm safe to say only I am, but I'm kidding. But, you know, so when you can stop, and this is a forced stop, right? We're forced to stop doing all of that, right? It's been months since any of us have gotten on a fully crewed boat and gone racing. And it looks like it's going to be a few months more. I really do think that. So I go out sailing on the Harbor 20 with my girlfriend, and suddenly I'm reintroduced to the pure joy of the basics of sailing. It helps that my girlfriend is a newbie, and her enthusiasm is through the roof. She loves everything about it, and I get to teach her some things. And you know, she goes, "Oh, I just love the sound of the boat going through the water." So believe it or not, Alex, I'll actually be quiet, and we'll just listen, and the boat just nicely going, you know, the waves against the hull. You don't hear really anything other than sort of the wind and the sails being trimmed, and it's a beautiful thing. And so how do we continue to do that? I think maybe what you said is family sailing. But you know, it's interesting. I'm noticing some of the other sports, the real sports, maybe call them the stick and ball sports. Even NASCAR, you know, they're going, but that's different. That's just one guy and a small pit crew. But you know, now they're talking about NBA. They're trying to figure out how to do it. How in the hell do you put 10 sweaty guys on a basketball court without masks and think you're gonna be okay? I mean, it seems problematic. I only bring that up in relation to crewed sailing now, right? How do we do that? I don't really know.
Well, it should be the resurgence of the laser, right? I mean, it's the least expensive way to go sailing. It's one of the funnest boats to sail. And you can, with two people, you can be your 6 feet apart and practice your social distancing and still learn something.
True.
You know, so there is that element that I think would be great. You know, where are those days of 200 boats again? You know, that's really the thing. And I think some of the other things, you know, and a little bit on your subject, but we'll digress a little bit, just slightly, of, you know, a lot of our programs have been focused on FJs, or let me start farther back. Sabbath for California.
Yep.
FJ, Optimist, 420. Fantastic ways to get tons of kids into sailing. High school sailing, college sailing, fantastic ways to get boys and girls into sailing.
Yeah.
But then what happens? They just fall off a cliff. Where'd all those guys go?
I know.
Well, not that I know the answer, but we had a cruising class. And if I learned about sailing a different boat, maybe I wouldn't quit because I'm kind of burnt out on the FJ. So maybe I like wooden boats and I enjoy varnishing because it gives me therapy. And I wish I could sail a wooden boat and racing classic boats, right? I race on a 50-foot classic boat that's older than I am. And it's all varnished and perfect. And it's so much fun to race classic boats, And then you got other guys that are just, well, I don't like the FJ anymore. But they don't learn how to tune a boat either. They didn't learn how to tune the snipe, so they can't really get into the snipe, and they didn't know the snipe existed. So this is where that cruising class, this is where other boats become important. We had 49er or 29ers at San Diego Yacht Club. Happened to get one, take my kids on it. My nephews got on it. Now there's 10. And they're full on racing 29ers.
When I did the interview with John Malcolm, head coach, where's he head coach at? I've forgotten already.
Yeah.
It's one of the things we addressed was, okay, you got all these kids, they come through the program, a lot of really high quality sailors, right? A lot of kids who, they don't have to be that great, just come out, you can be a part of the team, on your own level. I thought that was really fascinating, by the way. I just assumed that they had just hardcore sailors through and throughout the program. And let's face it, the bulk of the attention does go to those people that can actually win and do well. But the interesting thing was the drop-off. Even at that level, the drop-off, kids don't really necessarily recycle back into the sport. I know a lot of them go off and have careers. But I'll tell you, my observation, just from afar, is that they don't necessarily come back and buy a boat. And,
correct.
They don't keep the cycle going, right? And so it's interesting. There's not a lot of new blood, and there's certainly not a lot of new boats. So it tends to fall on the shoulders of us older folk, and we kind of have to find ways to get people in. One of the problems with this sport, and it's always been a problem with this sport, and it will continue to be a problem with this sport throughout this virus period that we're in, is the barrier to entry is so difficult. You mentioned, I'm going to get a laser. Now, a lot of people can put it somewhere in their garage or their backyard or whatever, but some people can't. There's no storage at yacht clubs. If they want to go, hey, I'd like to get a new, let's say you get a new Jeanneau 3600 or whatever they're called, right? The double-handed boats, single-handed and double.
Yep.
That's a real big push for a lot of these companies. Okay, well, but I have this, Ericsson 35 I need to sell first. So, and then you realize, you see the ticket that it costs to get one of those Jeanneaus. They're not cheap, but it answers a lot of questions. That is, I can go racing. I only need one other person. Maybe I could just do it by myself. And that's a great way to move forward. I just think the transition from where we are now, the status quo, as it were, to a different future for sailing is really going to be a hard one to make.
I agree. And sailing has become an institutional sport in a way in regards to, San Diego Yacht Club, 24 FJs. Fantastic. We've got another 10 little J22s, which, you pay your annual fee and you can go sailing whenever you want. So I think that is one of the answers to take care of the barrier to entry. Now, granted, you got to be a member of the yacht club. So, but still, probably cheaper than one of those double-handed boats you're talking about.
Yeah,
so understood that the barrier to entry is high. I mean, it's an expensive sport, and we don't burn out necessarily at or age out because of our ability. And here we are, and we're going to be 70 plus years old, still going at it, thinking that we're Olympic material. So it probably does get a little bit expensive, but there's still a good opportunity. But it's the drop-off rate that's the problem.
It is.
I think that
go ahead.
Junior program is really where it's at. If we're only doing 2 boats, and we're getting people in who don't own boats, but if we're not giving them an opportunity to sail a different boat, because how do you know that you're not the next Volvo 65 guy, or that you're not the next guy to be in St. Bart's or Saint-Tropez sailing an old classic?
Yeah.
Or how do you know, that you want to go race with Scott Tempesta and that's your life ambition? well, what, you know, we're
I know.
not giving them that vehicle.
Yep.
You know, you're bringing a bunch of new people in every time that you go sailing. I see that. It's fantastic and it's super entertaining.
And
You
they
know,
love it. And they love it.
and they love it, right? And I got a chance 10 years ago to, you know, we want to talk about big boats a little bit. How did I get into big boats? Kind of by accident. I happened to speak Spanish, and a guy bought a 70-foot sled and said, look, our project mission is to bring sailing bigger boats to Mexican sailors.
We're talking about Pelagroso, right?
We're talking about Pelagroso,
The
yeah.
Kernan
Kernan
70.
70.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, hey, I'm a dinghy sailor. I haven't done it overnight. Well, I did a Newport Ensenada race, which was, you know, I'm not sure that that counts for anything. That you know, 130 miles is now just a sprint or a day race. So,
having said that, numbers are declining there hugely too. I mean, just right, the Newport Ensenada race used to get 500-600 boats, right? I think they're struggling to get like a $180 now,
yeah.
you know. And now after this, God forbid what'll happen here. But your point is made. So that's how you sort of got going, and you like the big boat.
Well, I you know, at first I was scared to death. You know,
Sure.
like, what do you mean I don't get to sleep in my bed? You know, I have to sleep in a bunk that hopefully moves, and some of them don't. And you know, and you're constantly moving. So, you know, for me, that was a whole new experience to sail in a big boat. And, you know, the race is now 24 hours a day. You know, you're 4 hours on, 4 hours off. And for me, it wasn't an easy thing to sleep either, because I was running the boat, you know, playing tactician part of the time, playing navigator part of the time, playing sail trimmer part of the time, playing coach part of the time, being chef part of the time, driving, and then you're on for an hour, and, you know, so you know, I did it my first Transpac. I think we did it in almost 8 days and or 7 3/4 days, and I calculated out that I slept about 19 hours, and it's like, wow, that's not exactly very good.
No.
You know, but I can't, you know, couldn't turn it off. But, you know, which is great. And
well,
then,
of course you can't. I mean, I've sailed with you. I was lucky enough to have Alex come on board and be my tactician in a regatta that Sailing Anarchy used to run in the South Bay. And the thing that was the most amazing about you, and I think it actually comes through in this interview, was your intensity and your focus. And you missed nothing. I mean, there was and you would both micro and macro manage. You know, you'd micromanage the boat a little bit. You'd see guys not doing something right. You know, tell them this is how you got to do it. You would say it quickly, no doubt about the fact that you were giving somebody a command. My crew wasn't quite used to that. You know, they're used to me barking. Who's this other asshole barking? Well, it turns out this other asshole's pretty fucking good. And so you're surveying the race course. You know, you're looking at the hand-to-hand combat with other boats. I mean, it was amazing to watch you sail. And I think you sailed with me on the Melvis 32, maybe one time after that. But that regatta was a real eye-opener for the level that's required to be really successful on the race course. You come from really high-level racing at all these classes. And then you were on the Flying Tiger, and you took that exact same attack, that exact same approach, and applied it to our boat for the weekend. We won the regatta, and I'll just say straight up, the only reason we won the regatta is because Al managed to get me off the goddamn starting line in pretty good shape almost all the time, against my best wishes. I'm like, are you sure I can go in there? And you're like, fucking get in there. And I'm like, and then we pulled it off. I'm like, okay, I think I'll listen to this guy a little bit more. So, you know, I always appreciated that you don't miss anything. And so I can imagine on Pelagroso, you have like 9,000, 100 million things to like not miss, right? Everything, the electronics, the head, you know, what are we doing on the race course? What's the crew doing? The sail selection? I mean, no wonder you slept 19 hours, right?
Right, and this was only with a group of 11 guys. You know, when we sail buoys, it's 22 plus guys. So, but let's just back up just a sec to your little regatta. You know, you were running the regatta, so you didn't sleep at all the day before. So you were pretty haggard already Saturday morning, and we kind of choked on Saturday, and you finally got a little sleep, and we were probably like 5th or 7th or 8th, something like that, I think, in the results after Saturday. So
Wasn't pretty.
So we had to have a pretty good day on Sunday. And I recall, I remember one comment I said, Scott, I really need you to sail a little higher and a little faster right now. And you gave me this look of like, are you insane? Like you're asking for the world right now. And we trimmed the main a little bit tighter, and we sailed a little higher, and we hiked out a little harder, and we sailed a little faster, and
a little higher.
So it's an interesting thing that you mentioned that, because I've had other people say that too. Like, Al, how do you bring that level of intensity? And it's come from sailing with Dennis Conner. Like if you don't bring your A++ game, Vince Broom,
you're not sailing with Dennis.
A++ game. Mark Reynolds, A++ game. Dave Ullman, A++. And so you learn quickly to not really mess up, and you better be thinking 5 steps ahead, because you're going to get asked.
And your personality, it's evident in the interview here. Your personality is just laser focused and intense. I've sailed with Dave Ullman before, and the guy's got a really sort of almost a laid back approach, but his focus is like no other. Mark Reynolds, a little bit the same. He's a very laid back guy in every way, but on a boat, he's really, really focused on the things that he sees and the things that he knows matters, right? And so I really always admired that about you. And I do understand that really, without that kind of intensity and focus, at the upper end of the other classes, you can't stay there. You can't even get there, let alone stay near the top, right? I mean, it's very true. Let's step back to the Peligroso thing. So the owner wanted to bring sailing to Mexico, because we're talking a little bit about participation here, right? And I know there were always Mexicans on the boat, and it looked like a really fun boat from afar. I always was stunned why San Diego didn't have a community sailing center, why somehow the Port District didn't carve out a space, and there was time to do it. I mean, there was before now, where they could have actually built something nice. And there's a lot of other places in the country that have really nice community sailing centers, right? And I think that had we had that, you would have brought a lot more of the community in, because right now the sailing community is us, and it's this little bubble, right? And we're at this yacht club, or we're at that yacht club, and most everybody on the outside is going, wow, I'd like to do that, but I don't, unless you know somebody, or unless you rent a boat and then you meet somebody or whatever it might be, your opportunities aren't there. And so I think we're dealing with kind of this, just a circle of members, their kids, then their kids, then their kids, then their kids. And I don't know how we get any bigger from a racing standpoint. I don't know how we get outside of that.
Well, my 2 cents is a simple solution. You send out a postcard to everybody in your zip code that's by your yacht club or an area, and you say, on this day, we've got open sailing. And you take out your J22s, and you get 10 boats out there with 10 instructors, and you bring them out for a day sail. And you just feed them, give them a good time, and get them a little bit into, hey, let's see if we can beat that guy. And then they say, well, I'd like to come back. And all of a sudden, you've got members applying for yacht clubs, because, membership is getting older, and we need new members. So why not hook them that way? And it's so simple. I mean, it's really part of our duty as, it's our fiduciary responsibility as sailors. And if we love the sport of sailing, we should be doing that anyways. We should be bringing in new people. And that's what the Peligroso program did. We brought in new Mexican kids all the time. And we never had enough people. So I got to bring in people who wanted to come sailing, people who'd never been sailing before, people that, were from different walks of life. So for them, it was a tremendous opportunity. And I think that we can do that really easy and really inexpensively through programs that have boats already.
Yeah.
Wounded Warrior program has a great thing,
Sure.
So why don't we do that, but just open it up to the community? And then
they're
not looking down on us from the hill like, whoa, look at those elite people. No. And barrier to entry, zero cost at that point.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a good question. And the problem is it's not been answered. Why Why don't we? Nobody's really stepped up and answered that. Maybe that's a conversation, we can have a little later. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about before we get out of here and before we get to a couple reader questions is, so especially with COVID, I mean, it has changed everybody's world. I put up a little thing today on the J70 North Americans, were canceled. And I had a snide little comment like, well, there's gonna be a lot of pros going hungry, because a lot of guys, that sail J70s, they're pros. They get paid, right? And even that class, when they used to get, I don't know how many boats, 50 boats for the big regattas, right? 60 boats?
Oh, bigger, yeah. It was like 80, 100 boats. They had a couple of worlds where they had to turn people away.
Well, now, though, since it probably costs a minimum of 30 or 50 grand to do a regatta from an owner standpoint, right? It just does. So yes, some of the top guys will still do that. But those guys in the upper middle fleet that are slogging it out and maybe getting somewhere, maybe not, how interested are they going to be in spending 40 grand to go do the big regattas in Florida? I think you're going to see a lot of that fleet going, no, I'm not going to spend that much. Maybe it'll also make a class like that have to sort of take a look inward and determine, wow, these boats are not that expensive to get. They're nice little things for exactly what they are. But god damn, my operating cost to go to regattas, I mean, I gotta pay these 2 guys, whatever their day, maybe 3 guys, their day rate, and blah, 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 blah. I wonder if it'll take classes like that to go, maybe we should look at a different way, because participation is probably going to fall off. Where do we get more, right? And so I look at this sport now, and I'm sure you're doing the same thing. This is really one of the things I want to talk to you about. We touched on it. Where do you see this sport going? And I'm talking about the competitive end of things. Where do you see? Do you get a sense for a direction? Is this now a chance to pivot as a sailing community and write new rules, how we go forth? And I don't mean racing rules. I just mean like you mentioned, get 6 people on a boat. Does everybody have a mask? Is that good enough? I don't really know, but where do you see it going? Do you see a direction?
I do, and I think it's actually one that makes a lot of sense, and it's one that's a little less competitive. It's an option that says, gosh, why are we sailing? And I like to hear the water on the side of the hull. I like to feel the wind on my face. I like to test myself against elements that I can't control, the ocean and the wind.
Right.
And, if I have a crewed boat, I'd like to see if we can actually all get together and be on the same page and work together, and maybe we pull off a good result. But the other side of it is, let's just go sailing. Let's just go have some fun. And I think that this is one of those hard stop opportunities where it would be an error on our side if we finish this lockdown, or we finish this pandemic, and next year at some point when we're saved by a vaccine or something, we come back and we go, gosh, I really should have done more in that lockdown. I could have really, my house is in order, my garden is growing, and my sourdough is brewing. Okay, but what are we doing? So I think for me it's a great it's a great opportunity to reflect back and say, well, really, what's my focus? And I tell you, from sailing snipes and sailing thistles, those are some of the funnest classes to ever sail in. Thistle guys go camping and everybody's together and they're super social. Lightning class as well. J70, yeah, it's a pro class. It's a pro class. Why? Well, Far 40s died. J70 cost the price of a jib or a spinnaker or something along those lines, and it got a lot less expensive, a lot less hotel rooms, and a lot easier to travel, and was fun. And we had 100 boats. And I get it. There are going to be those guys that are okay, above average, can sometimes mix it up with the top guys, and they're going to want to spend the money to go do it because you get a chance to race against some of the top guys. And I get that the pros are going hungry, and it's tough. I mean, but there's always going to be room for that. But let's not just focus on them.
I think there'll be less room for that.
Well, it's possible because we're talking about prices of things that are a little ridiculous.
We are.
And the days of you bringing your own sandwich, are long gone. And it's like, well, I didn't get my roast beef with, sauteed blah, 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 and my spinach sandwich with olives in it, So Before it was just, peanut butter and jelly sandwich and we go. So maybe we've gone a little too far to the extreme and we need a little bit more of coming back to the basics and enjoying the sailing part. Enjoying the sailing part.
That gets so lost. It gets,
so lost.
What the environment, our water, our wind, everything about it just becomes a racetrack. That's all it is, right? I mean, that's ultimately what happens. When was the last time you were on a boat and you looked around and went, wow, it's so beautiful out. I mean, it's like, what? Pay attention to the numbers,
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's what happens.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned less competitive. That's I guess how you do it, right? I mean, I think the racing will probably always remain strong for the guys who really do want to win, right? In every class, right? PHRF, J70s, it doesn't matter. But it's a little bit like, okay, so what do we do after we race? Well, you know what we do. Now, you mentioned some of the classes have great social scenes. They're friends, they hang out. A lot of them don't. Just in general, it's like, let's just use an example in San Diego. You race, you go to the bar, right? That's the social setting it is. And then you tend to leave and you don't see somebody till the next regatta, right? One of the reasons why I'm changing gears and I'm selling A4 and I'm going to buy another boat, Erickson 35 Mark II, if I find the right one, is because when I was a kid, we lived in Burbank and we kept our boat in Oxnard. And so every Friday after work, my dad, my mom, me and the dog piled into the station wagon, go to Oxnard, and we stay there from Friday late evening till Sunday late afternoon, right? We did that almost every weekend. And one of the things I loved about it is we're staying on the boat. And so is this family. And so is this family. And so is this family. So the dock we were on, B-Dock, there was probably 10 families that did almost exactly the same thing. So this became the social platform, right? Yes, we raced, but we all hung out and stuff. So I like to hang out at the yacht club. I mean, I like to run into you or various people, right? That if I just come racing on a Saturday, I don't get to see them. But if I race and we can camp on the boat and do a weekend on the boat, enjoy, slow the pace down just a little bit. It doesn't have to be, let's run to the boat. Let's do the regatta. Let's run to the bar. Let's go home. How about a fucking breath in between every one of those steps?
Here we are taking several breaths now, right? I really hope, because that's the opportunity we have. And I think we owe it to ourselves. One, we're being forced to slow down, which is fantastic, because the world would just keep going faster and faster and faster. And the days and the years go by, and all of a sudden, hey, I'm almost 50. Well, what happened? So I think it's a great opportunity for everybody to slow down, take a breath, figure out what you really want out of sailing, go back and enjoy your sailing. Go back and enjoy it. Why do we get 130 boats in a Wednesday night beer can, Scott, when we can't get 10 boats to come out on a Saturday and Sunday? Hey,
you know why? Because it's more fun. It's more fun. The beer can series and the hot rum series, more fun. Simple as that.
More fun.
I know. Isn't that interesting? So how do we do that? And I know our yacht club has tried little family races and stuff, like participation. I think the sport does need a rethinking in a lot of ways. And the points you brought up were excellent. Let me jump to a couple reader questions here. Somebody here really likes you, so I'm not going to spend too much time on that. Now, this is something we didn't touch bases on, and I don't really know the status. How is the clothing business doing?
Good. Well, pandemic time, it's shocking, really. Made in America products all of a sudden, doing really, really well. Lots of guys got a chance to sit down and slow down and like, maybe I'm going to buy some stuff for my sailing. So it's actually been pretty good. We've been doing this for a long, long time.
Camet apparel, man. Wow.
Yeah, and it was, and where does it come from? Everyone asks, well, why'd you decide to start it? And the jokey answer is, well, you've got clothing with your name on it. Well, yeah, don't you remember sixth grade camp where your mom wrote your name on it? That's the joke answer. But the real answer is, we grew it out of a necessity, really. I mean, it was here we are, we're sailing lasers, and hiking pants didn't really exist, and so we made some hiking pants, and then we made some wetsuit hiking pants, and we traveled to all the regattas, and that happened. Then got into the big boat series, big boat sailing, and it was, gosh, kind of these shorts, my OP corduroy shorts aren't really cutting it anymore. And, you know, my thighs are getting kind of burned with the sun. So maybe something a little bit longer, maybe some cargo shorts, you know.
My hot pink dolphin shorts were no longer cutting it.
Yeah, HR would not be okay with those either, you know.
Right.
So
good. So Camet's doing well from the apparel standpoint.
yeah, it's pretty good, you know, and it's, we've been doing it for a long time, you know, and can't complain.
Do you guys, and I know you guys have built a line that's very reliable, really functional. Is there much effort in developing new stuff?
Well, that's always been a passion of my dad's, right? And you know that it's well, what if we tried this, and what about that, and we could tweak it here, and there's this new fabric, you know, and yeah, it's always fun for him.
You guys were definitely pioneers, I think, in a lot of ways in terms of some of the fabrics and the materials and the applications, right?
Yeah.
Let's see. Can-esque wants to know, who's the funniest person you've ever sailed with?
So nobody knows this guy, and he's actually he's a Mexican kid, and his name is Mitre, and you know, we're gonna go race the Transpac, you know, 3 or 4 years ago, and the owner of the boat's like, look, you know, we've got a choice. We can bring this guy who's a really good chef, or we can bring this other guy, but he doesn't really know much about sailing. He's a good friend though. And I think about it, you know, I'm like, I'm in charge of the food, so I know what's for dinner, you know, and it's all pre-made. All you got to do is boil it. So we don't really need the chef. And I'm like, we should bring this guy, because I know that at 2 in the morning when I'm on watch and it's pitch freaking dark, and my eyes, I can't see the instruments anymore, and I'm cold,
Right.
and I've eaten all the, you know, all the Werthers and the crackle candies and the Twix that are in my pockets that I stuffed before I came up on deck. You know, and I'm driving like, okay, please, I need my hour to be over. You know, and this guy comes on deck and he's telling you story after story after story. And you're like, well, this guy doesn't know how to sail. Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Value add in keeping you entertained and telling you one funny story after the other, you know, of, hey, I went home thinking I was with the girl and her name was Arturo. And, you know, and you're laughing at 2 in the morning, and all of a sudden you're down, you know, the next guys are down below and they come up on deck and they're like, what was going on? What were you guys laughing at so hard you woke me up? You know, and I think that, you know, this kid was really good at that. And that's something that I've taken in all of my sailing now, because at the end of the day, you know,
Come on,
look how
it
many
has to be
trophies
fun.
you got sitting there, you know,
better.
and really,
Yeah,
you know,
right.
Did you have a good time? Sometimes yes, and sometimes no. But, you know, and that's what I tell a lot of people. They're like, oh, you know, we got some guys on the crew that aren't really that much fun. Well, don't quit sailing. Don't quit sailing. Just change out the crew and keep going until you find somebody that's fun.
You know, it's interesting. It used to be, the definition of fun used to be that we won, right? Was it fun? Let's say you get third in a regatta foursome. Was it fun? No, it sucked. Well, it didn't really suck. You just, your only goal is the win. But, you know, over the years, and especially with A4, I mean, our motto is like, we sail hard and tell dick jokes. You know, it's like when we're racing, we're sailing hard, right? But in between races and going out to the race course and coming back at the bar, you know, it's just a yuck fest. And if you don't have that element, if it's all serious all the time, it ain't going to be that much fun. And it's not going to be that much fun for the crew. It's like, geez, I'm getting yelled at, nobody's laughing, I can't get a beer. You know, it's
right.
That's missing. And so that's an interesting thing.
It totally is. And it's one of those things where there are those moments where you tell the crew, hey, do you guys mind hiking just a little bit harder? You know, let's keep the focus for about 30 seconds. We have an opportunity here to cross a boat. Sure. I think that's valid, and people will do that for you as long as they understand that there is that fun element in it as well. You know, this is only temporary, and we're going to enjoy our time together, because what's the point?
What's the point?
The point is to hang out with our friends. You know, you get to sail with your girlfriend and a lot of your buddies, and every once in a while I get to go out with you guys. We have a great time. You know, you might get a little more nervous than most people, but, you know, we do pretty good. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. But how do we spend that day? Because I can tell you, I can spend the day with my kids, that's that clock is ticking, right? So the clock is ticking with your girlfriend probably too, right? There's only so many days she's going to tolerate you, so
That's a given.
make the best of those days, right? That's all I'm saying.
Absolutely.
Make the best of those days.
It's what you brought up something, and I don't want to focus too much on sailing on the Flying Tiger, but that's what you were really good at. So, you would set the tone on the boat, like go through all the rigging, make sure the bow guy, everybody sort of knew their role. We get going, you get a general level of organization. And here's what I liked about you. You would create a level of intensity that was very situational. Just like you said, hey, we got an opportunity here in the next 30 seconds to cross this guy that's coming. Let's hike a little harder. Let's get a little focused. And the crew would respond to that. And more often than not, you were right. And we cross. And then I could just get the sense of people are like, they were buying into it. Like, okay, that really did work. What he asked us to do there in that 30 seconds, and we did, actually really worked. And I noticed that the crew, even though they despised you, they really bought into what you were bringing. And I thought it was just absolutely phenomenal. Okay. All right. At what point in your sailing life did you realize you were good?
Well, I think for me, it was kind of lucky. Like when we very first started talking, we talked about going sailing and just sailing. And then it was, hey, did you know that there's the youth champs? Well, what's that?
Mm-hmm.
And let's see what that's all about. And, I was 17 years old and got to go to Rush Creek, in Texas and go sailing in the youth champs and got 6th place. And then it was in that was 87 and 88. It was.
Was that it? Let's say the youth champs and you got 6th. Did you suddenly go like, I'm pretty good. I'm pretty decent. I mean, was there a moment like that?
The Sabbats came really, the Sabbats is really kind of where it first started. All of a sudden, you get a little better boat. You're doing a little bit better. We started sailing a little more.
Mm-hmm.
I went from C fleet to B fleet to A fleet. Never really did well at the nationals, but was in the top 5 or whatever. And I'm like, well, I'm actually okay at this. And I tried out for the basketball team and couldn't do a freaking layup. So I was like, oh shit, I think I better stick with this boating stuff because
I suck at everything else.
I can't do the perfect spiral on a football,
Right.
and I can play pool, but that's because I'm a sailor and go to the bar. But not very good at any other sport, so better stick to it.
But everybody has there's a realization, and I know it's one of the problems at the junior program at San Diego Yacht Club, is so everybody wants to get to the top of the pyramid, right?
Right.
But in order to create a pyramid, you have to have a base of people down here and in here. And the problem with the people down here is if they don't get anywhere, they're out. It sucks. It sucks. You got good and you're like, okay, I'm going to do this, right? A lot of other kids did. I did the same thing. But the real fear is the kids who just never get there or get it or get that moment, right? And that's why I was asking you, was there a moment you
okay, so there's a couple things. One of them is that when I was growing up, there were a ton of kids. So you're talking about the pyramid, but that funnel, that pipeline, that's building into this pyramid has to be huge.
Yes.
Okay. So first of all, so we have a problem there. We got to make sure that funnel is being fed. And, to some extent we do. We have a really good entry level beginner sailing, which is great. And then we get them into FJs and things like that. But right when that fall comes and they're going to go off that cliff, if we didn't teach them something else about sailing, and this is my point of, well, I'm not going to go sail a fin because I physically can't.
Right.
But you know what? There's a laser radial. There is a snipe. There is an Etchells. There's 2-man, 3-man, 4-man, 20-person boats. And if I didn't know about that,
right,
I'm going to quit.
Right.
So if we provide that opportunity, we would have much less of that dropout. And we're talking about sailing in general. And then you're asking me about, let's go racing.
Yeah.
Yeah, press the fingers together. So the docks at the clubs are going to be empty if we don't do something.
It's so true. And I think girl I was going out with, her daughter, we wanted to get her into the junior program, and they just started the adventure sailing class, right?
Yeah.
And that was cool because kids could just get out and basically mess around in boats. And by the way, there's nothing half as much fun as simply messing around in boats, right? So that's people that, because that junior program's intense. Like, you gotta be ready to go. You gotta be like, okay, I'm gonna do this, right? Well, some kids like, I don't really want the competitive thing. Oh, well, you can go sail over here and do this. I think that's super
So
key.
adventure sailing is perfect for that. And that's where that cruising class comes in, when they said, hey, we have a chance to go out on, Dennis Connor's 12-meter Freedom at the time. So I'm kind of dating myself there. But, there were ILC 40s that were racing the Transpac. There were wooden boats. There were boats with the steering wheels backwards because they were so old, you know what I mean? So there were double masters. There was everything in between. And this is where you get that experience of going, I'm not going to quit sailing because I kind of like this other type of sailing.
Yeah.
And we're talking about sailing in general. So why don't we go into cruising? Or why don't we just enjoy the boat? And maybe, I like motorboats. So if you're thinking about it on a basic level of like, how do we keep the yacht club doors open? How do we keep the docks filled? Well, it doesn't have to be racing, because that's always going to be there. That top percentile, that 1% is going to be there. They're going to make their way through it. The uber competitive guys, the guys that have been able to raise the money to go and do the Olympics, those guys are always going to be there, and that's great. But 99.9% are just going to go sailing for fun and want to listen to the water, want to feel the wind, want to have a picnic, want to just get away.
Yes.
And what we never talked about was the freedom you have going sailing. I mean, you can jump on your laser and you could sail away.
Yes.
And you can sail away. There's no mom and dad. There is nobody.
Nope.
And here we go. And
that was an epiphany for me. I mean, the first time my dad taught me how to sail, the first time I sailed my Sabbath by myself, I realized, I think I was 10, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm out here by myself. It's me, the boat, and the environment. Nobody telling me what to do. And my parents, just like yours, very, very cool. But even still, it's that moment like, aha, I can do something that nobody else can, unless you sail, you really can. There are things to do. Of course, I understand it. You can hike and all kinds of stuff, scuba dive, whatever it is. But this was absolute freedom for me as a young buck. And I think you're basically expressing the same thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Last question. I think we talked about this. How do you continue to get better? How do you actually, Al? How do you continue to get better as a sailor? Or is it more of being better at being a human being? Is it better? You know what I mean?
So I ask my girlfriend this all the time. I'm like, so are we getting smarter, or does this come with older age? As we get older, that we change from, hey, I'm listening to 91X rock to all of a sudden I'm listening to, to the local, radio.
Not me, man. Not me, bro. I'm the punk ethos. It exists all the time.
Well, all of a sudden you're listening to NPR and you're like,
yeah. What happened to me?
Whoa.
What happened?
So I think that we develop as human beings, I think. And, the Buddhists believe in transcending, right? And I think that we do, to some extent. We transcend from being an invincible 20-year-old or 21-year-old and to all of a sudden learning a little bit more, and maybe some of us learning when to not talk so much and sometimes not, and all of a sudden being a little bit more attentive to things, and we have a little more time to think potentially as we grow older. And talk about building patience, be a parent, for goodness sake. And when I, became a parent, and all of a sudden I could do 20 things in the same amount of time it took me to do one before that's amazing, right? And then the chances of, and having kids is an amazing thing. And I want to spend all that time with them too. But you learn to think, and I think that's really what's going on, is we're able to mature as sailors. We're able to plan farther ahead. We've seen enough scenarios that we learn to be patient. And I heard an interview the other day, and they're like, God, you West Coast sailors are so conservative. I wonder why that is. Are you aggressive or conservative? And well, I'll tell you why we're conservative, because we've got a race course out in the ocean that's fairly long, and it's fairly one-sided, and you've got to wait and wait and wait and
Yes.
wait for your opportunity.
Yes.
So you're learning a ton of patience. So it's not a lake sailing. It's not bang the corners on a lake and you're going to come out and see who wins. The middle always loses. This is usually a side. So your patience is being built. So you're learning to be conservative. So you're learning to be a thinker. You're learning how to tweak your boat. You're learning how to gain little inches all the time. So that's kind of where that conservative side comes from. So I think we as San Diego or West Coast sailors have become more developed in that side, more of the boat speed side, more of the conservative sailing side, more thought being involved,
Sure.
and when I sailed, with Vince Bruin, we're sailing downwind, and he's holding the tiller with two fingers, and he's kind of leaning in, and he's looking down to leeward, like below the boom, and I'm like, I don't see anything there.
Looking down there. Shouldn't you be looking
what
here?
What is going on? And it's just watching the heel of the boat, feeling the rudder, knowing when the pressure's on, bearing down, coming back up again. He wasn't really looking forward. He was just looking to leeward and watching kind of the wake. And you're like, oh, I thought he was just, I don't know what he was thinking. And there he was in the game, 100%, thinking about it. And I'm like, oh, hey, that's a little piece there. You better remember that one. And that's true. Like, you don't have to be, looking forward all the time. You can feel the boat, which is fantastic, to really be able to feel the boat and make it move.
I always thought it was important to, and of course you get yelled at. I'm not sure how many times you yelled at me at our regatta, but I think it's always important if you're a skipper to look around. I mean, you need to know. You can't just go, okay, telltales. I pull it, because is anybody grinding you? You just need to get a sense for things, and then that gives you a little information, and then you can focus a little more on steering. But I always think it's really important to see what's going on, and it's amazing. You have people sitting on the rail sometimes, right, who you think would see things, but they don't. And so I'll go, oh, God damn, how those guys are grinding us. Like, didn't you guys see that? You're sitting there, but so it comes with being a skipper. Like, there's a lot of responsibility. So I try not to, miss what otherwise might be going on. All right, last question. Have there been points in your career when you wish you had gone in another direction?
So I don't have any real regrets. I've lived a happy-go-lucky life. I've gotten to sail with some really good guys on some really good boats and had a lot of fun. I've been scared out of my mind sailing, almost drowned sailing.
Fabulous sailing family to be a part of, right?
Yeah, and so pretty lucky, count my blessings every day about that. And I think that it's really, I think that the sailing side of it has really helped out in regards to just helping balance everything out, like being able to step away from society, step away from the grind, step away from everything, and, recapture kind of, what are we doing? Why are we here? Let's have some fun. Let's enjoy it. And those are the things that sailing has really brought to my life, and really been able to help out in everything that I do. And it just happens to be that, my sport is my hobby, and it's also where I make my money, and it pays the bills. And, and I got fortunate enough to put together, where I got paid to go sailing, where I get paid to go work on people's boats. And that's pretty nice, and so I think it's, overall it's kind of worked out, and pretty lucky about it.
I think it's just a little bit of maturity, because there's a point when you could have gone full pro, right? There are guys in your age group that are doing full pro. I mean, there really are, right? There are.
Yeah.
But
so I know we've gone past our 15 minutes, and I appreciate you, going past the 15 minutes, giving me 16 and a half here. But
That's all.
We had 200 guys sailing lasers in 1996, 95, 96. I'd say most of those guys that are still sailing are all pros. So we ramped up to a level that they had to continue on, and those guys made choices that said, I want to keep going this way. My choice was different, and I'm happy with my choice. But see, everybody's still, everyone's a winner, and they're mine. They're world champions, but you know what? I got a great family. I like being home. I like what I do, and I really enjoy that. But if I look back, the only time I would say that there was an opportunity, let's say, would have been, I had a chance to go to the Naval Academy, and I'm like, 4 years in Navy? I don't think I could do that, especially if I can't be told what to do. Might not work out.
Yeah,
So,
you're not good at that. You're not good at the being told what to do stuff. I'm not either.
I'm working on that.
Yeah, I am too. I think I'm getting very far.
Yeah, yeah. Therapists love it, but no. It's the one chance. I think if I had said, well, maybe I would do it differently, it would have been going to Old Dominion for college. I was there. Guys like Terry Hutchinson were there, Marty Coleman, Jeff Olson were all there at the time. And, I go there and it snows like 9 inches. Whoa, this blows, and I'm out of here. I'm sailing on the West Coast.
Right.
So, that's the only time you could sit there and potentially say, well, maybe I could have been All-American or, do what Terry does. But, my choices were my choices, and they were great choices to me. And I think that goes to show how diverse sailing really is, and how many different opportunities there are in sailing. You don't have to be 12-time world champion, because at the end of the day, you can have all those pieces of metal next to your bed, but the bed's still empty.
Yeah. Perfect point. We'll end on that. Alex Camet, thank you very much. I feel like we just barely scratched the surface in a lot of areas. And, I'll get you back on and we'll dig a little deeper next time. How's that sound?
Sounds fun. Let's do it.
You're the man. Thank you so much, brother.
Cheers.
Appreciate it.